Hello once again and welcome back to Team Miss A Lecture Edition. So for today, we will be discussing about the psychological view of the self. And for the learning objectives, at the end of this discussion, you'll be able to demonstrate critical and reflective thoughts in analyzing the different psychological theories in the study of the self. Then expound the self as a cognitive construction and examine the self as proactive and agentic. So first, now we have to define what is psychology. Okay, so etymologically speaking, psychology is derived from two Greek words psyche, which means spirit or soul, and locus, which means study. Therefore, during that time, it is being defined as the study of the soul or the study of the spirit. However, now it has become an independent science and it is now being defined as the studies of mental processes and human behavior. Since we are talking about behavior actually are activities or processes that can be observed objectively, such as the reaction of the muscles and the glands, as well as the organized responses as the whole. And there are two major types of behavior. We have the covert behavior and then the overt behavior. Covert behavior, these are feelings, these are thoughts, okay? And the overt behavior are actions which are visible to eyes, such as walking, talking, dancing, and so on and so forth. So, the main goal of psychology is for an individual to achieve the wholeness and be a well integrated person. Therefore, psychology of the self focus on the representation of an individual based on his or her own experiences. And these experiences can be derived from our social roles that we participated in different social positions within the society, such as the primary socialization, secondary socialization, group socialization, organizational socialization. Through socialization agents like family, school, community. Okay, so those we have been discussed from our sociological view of the self. Okay, so we studied the psychological self because we believe that beyond our physical attributes lies our psychological entity. So self as a cognitive construct or a cognitive construction. Okay, so it is a cognitive approach that focuses on mental processes rather than observable behavior. So this means that we will try to understand ourselves based on how our neural processes works which produce different cognitive consequences. Self plays an integral part in all aspects of human engagement or actions, such as motivation, cognition, affect, and social identity. Social identity pertains to how we present ourselves in the outside world or the social arena. Okay, so since we're talking about psychology, now we have to know William Wundt. So William Wundt is father of modern psychology. Okay, he considered psychology to be a scientific study of conscious experience, and he thought that psychology's purpose was to discover the elements of consciousness and how they interact to produce our conscious experience. He founded the school of structuralism because he attempted to understand the structure or the characteristics of the mind, thus, his interest in the self and its role in the behavior. So now we proceed to William James. So William James held that the mind should be investigated in terms of how well it can help a person adapt to their surroundings. And as a result, it emphasizes real world everyday experiences. So William James was the first American psychologist who believed or explain the different perspective on how psychology should operate. And he provides a useful schemes within which to view the multifaceted aspect of self-functioning. And for him, consciousness, or whatever is going on in our mind, is something personal and cannot be questioned. So now we move on to the distinction of the self. So previous in our previous discussions, a sociological view of the self, we mentioned about George Mead. Okay? And he says that there are two components of the self. We have the I, which is the self as the subject, and it is the response to the me or the person's individuality. Therefore, it is the response of the individual to the attitudes of others, while the me is the self as the object, which represents the expectations and the attitudes of others, which is organized into the social self. Therefore, the me is the organized set of attitudes of others which an individual assumes. So the me is the accumulated understanding of the generalized others, that is, how one thinks one group perceives oneself. Therefore, these dynamics go beyond selfhood and form the basis of the theory of human cognition. Now, for William James, there are two distinctions of the self, which is self as the knower, which is referred to as the I or the pure ego. It is the consciousness itself, and self as the knower, which is referred to as the me or the empirical self. So it is the one of the many things that the I may be conscious of, and it is consists of three components. We have the physical material, the social, and the spiritual. So, since the things that belong to us or to which we belong to, such as our family, our clothes, our bodies, our money, will make up our physical or the material self. While the social self, it is who we are in a given situation, according to William James. People change how they act depending on social situation. Then we have the spiritual self. Spiritual self is who we are at the core. It is more concrete and permanent. It is subjective part of who we are, which is it is the most intimate. And this includes our personality, our core values, our consciousness. And all of this does not change throughout a lifetime. Kaya sinasabi niya na concrete and permanent. Okay? Kasi kahit na ano yung ipinakikita natin sa ating social world, alam natin sa sarili natin kung sino talaga tayo. Kung ano ang nararamdaman talaga natin. Okay? So now we are going to proceed to the James Lang theory of emotion. According to James and Lang, as emotion is processed in the mind, he stressed that the self is founded on emotion. This means that what men call his own possession arouses certain emotional responses that form part of the self or the person's characteristics. So ano yung ibig sabihin nito? Sinasabi lang, since diba na-mention niya kanina that there are three components of the self. We have the physical material self, the spiritual self, and the social self. So for example, yung physical self. Sabi sa physical self, all that we belong to or we belong to us. So for example, family. Okay. So whatever happened to any member of the family, may nararamdaman tayo. So for example, yung kapatid natin nag-graduate. Kahit na hindi tayong gumraduate, masayang masaya tayo para sa kapatid natin. Okay? So it's an emotion. Another example, yung parents mo. Kapag nagkasakit yung parents mo, kahit na hindi ikaw yung may sakit, nalulungkot ka, at minsan napanghihinaan ka pa. Okay? Kasi that's part of who you are. Your parents are part of who you are. Kasi we belong to a family. Okay? So that's part of who we are. Kaya nga sinasabi that ang self daw is founded on emotion, which means what man call his own possession arouses certain emotional responses, and those responses form part of the self or the person's characteristics. Kasi pag malungkot tayo because may problema ang family member natin, affected din yung pakikipagsalamuhan natin sa ibang tao. Pagkasama natin yung barkada natin, the usual na masaya tayo, malungkot tayo kapag merong hindi magandang nangyayari sa any member of the family natin. Or kapag meron tayong pag-aari na nawala or nasira. So for example, yung cellphone mo. Yung cellphone mo na first investment mo, first sweldo mo, okay, nawala. Siyempre malulungkot ka. And because of that lungkot, nakakaapekto yun ah, sa relationship mo with your friends. Di ba? Kasi, yun na nga, pagkasama mo sila, the usual na masayahin ka, but at that particular moment, malungkot ka kasi nga nawala yung cellphone mo. Okay, so yun yung sinasabi niya that the self is founded on emotion. Okay, so now we will be discussing the different psychological concept of the self. And to start with, we're going to start with Sigmund Freud on his psychological or psychoanalytic theory. Okay, so the self as a regulating center of an individual's personality and self processes under the guise of the ego, superego, functioning which tells us of our internal processes happening inside the self. Okay? Ano ibig sabihin nun? Kasi 'di ba, sinabi natin during the philosophical view of the self na itong si Sigmund Freud, naniniwala siya na yung behavior natin uh, ay na-impluwensyahan o may influensya ng childhood experiences natin. Okay? So naniniwala din tong si Sigmund Freud na tayo daw o yung ating pagkatao ay um, malalim daw. Okay? So malalim daw ang pinag-ugatan ng dahilan kung bakit ganun daw ang behavior natin. Okay? So sinasabi niya na yung consciousness daw natin, okay, ay yung conscious part ng pagkatao natin ay mababaw lang. Okay? So mababaw lang. Na yun lang ang nakikita natin, yun lang ang ipinakikita natin, yun lang din ang nakikita ng tao sa atin. However, hindi natin nakikita at hindi rin nakikita ng ibang tao yung root cause kung bakit ganon yung behavior natin. Okay? Kaya nga siya, sinasabi niya, naniniwala siya sa psychoanalysis. Okay, ano yung psychoanalysis? It is a set of psychological ideas and therapeutic techniques in which it roots in the research and theories. Okay? And the main purpose of psychoanalysis is that every person has unconscious feeling, wants, memories, thoughts, and the aim of psychoanalysis therapy is to release the repressed emotions and experiences, making the unconscious conscious. Okay. So, ito si Sigmund Freud, nag-present siya ng model of the mind. Okay? And according to Sigmund Freud, there is a fundamental reason behind every action. An individual's unconscious is where their behaviors causes begin. Okay? So, our present day emotion, focus, and thoughts reside in our conscious state. And this is the conscious state. Itong maliit lang na ito, itong tip of the iceberg. Okay? And everything we can remember or recover from our memory is stored in our pre-conscious, which is often also referred to as the subconscious. So this part, okay? And the most fundamental part of our mind is the unconscious, dito sa ilalim. It is a collection of the mechanisms that control human behavior, including our innate and primal urges. He believed in the intricacy of the self as he sees I as a product of multiple interacting processes, systems, and schemas. In his proposed structural model, Freud presented the self in three different agencies. Okay? We have the id, the ego, and the superego. Okay? Kasi sabi ni Sigmund Freud dati, the I can never be taken as a whole. It can never be unified because inside the I are three opposing factors o three opposing forces. Ito nga si id, si ego, at si superego. Si id act based on instinct. It is known as the primitive and instinctive components of the self. Why? Kasi he act based on urges, our urges. Okay? Yung desires natin. Okay? Ito naman si ego, works on reality. It is the part of the id that has been modified by the direct influence of the external world. Okay? So, nag-refine na siya si ego because of the influence of the external world. Then we have the superego, okay, which act based on morality, and it synthesizes the moral values and systems in the society in order to function as the control outpost of the instinctive desires of the id. Okay? So, siya yung taga-control. Okay? Ito naman si ego, siya yung nasa gitna ni id at saka ni superego. So, binabalanse ni ego yung desires ni id at yung sobrang pagka-morality o moralidad ni superego. Si Sigmund Freud din, nag-propose din siya nung sinasabi niyang psychosexual stage of development. Okay. Itong psychosexual stage of development, naniniwala si Freud that personality develops through a series of childhood stages in which the pleasure-seeking energies of the id become focus on certain erogenous area. Ano yung mga erogenous area na yan? Yung erogenous area na sinasabi natin is characterized as an area of the body that is particularly sensitive to stimulation. Okay? And during the five psychosexual stages, which are the oral, the first stage, the anal, the second stage, third is the phallic, fourth, latent stage, and the five, genital stage. Okay? These stages are associated with erogenous zone, okay, as a source of pleasure. Okay, the psychosexual energy or libido was described as the driving force behind behavior. Each stage of development is marked by a conflict that can help build, grow, or stifle development, depending upon how they are resolved. If these psychosexual stages are completed successfully, a healthy personality is the result. If certain issues are not resolved at the appropriate stage, nagkakaroon tayo ng fixation. A fixation is a persistent focus on an earlier psychosexual stage. Until this conflict is resolved, the individual will remain stuck in the stage, and a person who is fixated, for example, sa oral stage, may be overly dependent on others, yung mga clingy na personality, or may seek oral stimulation. So, ito yung mga smokers, drinkers, yung mga binge eater, yung mga nagtatamsak o nagne-nail bite, ganon. So, pag hindi ka daw, for example, naka-move on successfully sa oral stage, ganon daw yung magmamanifest sa behavior mo. Okay. So, next, we will proceed to the psychosocial theory naman ni Erikson. Okay? So, Erikson maintained that personality develops in a predetermined order through 8 stages of psychosocial development. That is, starts from infancy, to adulthood. During each stage, the person experiences a psychosocial crisis, which could have positive or negative outcome for personality development. Unlike Freud's theory of psychosexual stage, Erikson's theory described the impact of social experience across the whole lifespan. Erikson was interested in how social interaction and relationship played a role in the development and growth of human being. Okay? His theory built on the preceding stages and paved the way for the following period of development. In each stage, Erikson believed people experience a conflict that serves as a turning point in development. In his view, these conflicts are centered on either developing a psychological quality or failing to develop that quality. During this time, the potential for personal growth is high, but so is the potential for failure. If people successfully deal with the conflict, they emerge from the stage with psychological strength that will serve them well for the rest of their lives. If they fail to deal effectively in this conflict, they may not develop the essential skills needed for strong sense of self. Erikson also believed that a sense of competence motivates behavior and action. Each stage in Erikson's theory is concerned with becoming competent in an area of life. If the stage is handled well, the person will feel the sense of mastery, which is sometimes referred to as ego strength or ego quality. If the stage is managed poorly, the person will emerge with a sense of inadequacy in that aspect of development. So itong 8 stages na to, ano yung mga conflict daw per stage? So in stage 1, you can either develop trust or you'll develop mistrust. Sa stage 2 naman, autonomy versus shame and doubt. Sa third, initiative versus guilt. Sa fourth, industry versus inferiority. Sa fifth, identity versus role confusion. Sa sixth naman, intimacy versus isolation. Sa seven, generativity versus stagnation. And then dito sa eighth stage, integrity versus despair. Okay? So, yun yung different conflict, okay, na na-encounter daw ng tao per stage from infancy up to adulthood. So, now we proceed to Albert Bandura's social cognitive theory. According to Bandura, not only does the environment influence a person's thinking, but their subsequent behavior influences their environment. So, in other words, the environment influences how a person thinks and feels, which in turn influence their behavior, which impact the environment. Okay? And this theory is anchored on 5 assumptions. So the first assumption is that people have the flexibility to learn the variety of behavior in varied situations, like direct observation. Okay? So sabi, meron ang tao daw ay likas na flexible. Okay? To learn a variety of behavior. So natututo daw tayo kung paano tayo mag-behave in different situation. Hindi tayo monotonous lang. Okay? Ibang behavior for a different situation. Okay? So nagdi-depend tayo. Kino-customize natin. Okay? Second assumption, through the triadic reciprocal causation. Okay, so this one, which is the interaction between 3 factors, which includes the behavioral factors, environmental factors, and the personal factors. And this means that people have the ability to adjust their life. Okay? So, nag-a-adapt pa rin tayo, di ba? Sabi nga ni Marcel Mauss, yung French anthropologist, sociologist, sabi niya ganun, that we adapt in our environment like a chameleon. Okay? Na depende kung anong sitwasyon, kung anong environment, kung anong kultura, then we are readily or can adapt ourselves accordingly. Okay? So the third assumption, it takes an agentic perspective, which means people have the capacity to control the nature and the quality of life. Okay? So we have that power because we have the ability to decide kung anong gusto natin. Kaya we have the ability to control our behavior. Okay? So because of that. Then the fourth assumption is that people regulate their action through the external and internal factors. Okay? So, kung ano daw yung action natin, kung ano yung behavior natin, nakaka-apekto yun sa internal at external factors. Pag sinabi natin external factors, we pertain sa physical or our social environment. Pag sinabi naman natin internal factors, we are talking about self-observation, our judgment, and our self-reaction. Okay? The fifth assumption naman, it's all about regulating our behavior or our action through moral agencies, which include redefining our behavior. Since nag-iisip tayo, we know how to regulate our behaviors morally. Kung ano yung katanggap-tanggap o hindi katanggap-tanggap sa isang society o sa isang culture and that particular situation, then we can readily know how to redefine our actions. Okay? Next, we will be moving on to um, the real self and the ideal self perspective ni Carl Rogers naman. So, si Carl Rogers naman believed that for a person to grow, he must need an environment that can provide him with genuineness or openness and self-disclosure. Kasi he believes that a person's basic motive is to self-actualize o sinasabi natin to reach its highest potential. Okay? Kaya kailangan yung self daw ay merong state of congruence o balance daw. Because self-actualization only occur when the person's ideal self is in harmony with his actual behavior. Actual self or yung actual behavior. Okay. So, sinasabi din ni Carl Rogers na he defined real self as it comprises all all the part of who we are. Okay? At sinasabi niya, it includes all those aspects of one's being and one's experiences that are perceived in awareness by the individual. Okay? So, kung ano daw tayo, kung anong alam natin sa sarili natin. Okay? Kung ano yung behavior natin, yung emotions natin. Okay? Which is perceived in awareness, alam natin yung alam natin. Yung ideal self naman revolves around our goals and ambitions in life. It is dynamic because the idealized image that we have developed over time. So, sinasabi lang dito na yung ideal self now natin ay kung ano yung inaasam-asam natin maging. Nakabase daw yon kung ano ang ating goals, kung ano ang ating ambition. Kaya sinasabi niyang dynamic kasi nagbabago. Okay? Nagbabago siya over time. Depende kung ano na yung gusto mo for yourself. So, for example, nung bata ka, gusto mong maging doktor. Kasi nakikita mo sa TV na kapag ka-doktor ka, sinasabi na magiging mayaman ka, may kotse ka, malaking bahay mo. Kasi sabi ng mga uncle mo, auntie mo, pag doktor ka daw, mahal daw yung bayad sa'yo. So, gusto mo maging doktor. However, as you grow up, nadidiscover mo kung ano talaga yung passion mo, kung ano talaga yung hilig mo. And then, you realize that you don't want really to be a doctor, but you want to be a teacher. Okay? Kaya nagbabago, kaya siya dynamic. Okay? Kasi nagbabago yung mga goals natin, yung mga ambitions natin in life. Depende yun kasi sa sitwasyon, depende sa kultura, kung ano yung kinalakihan natin, kung ano yung nakikita natin sa kapaligiran natin, na huhubog yung pagkatao natin. Okay? So, ito naman tayo sa perspective ni Karen Horney about the ideal self, actual self, and the real self. Okay? Si Karen Horney ay isang feminist psychologist who believes that everyone experience basic anxiety, through which we experience conflict and strive to cope and employ tension reduction approaches. Okay. Sabi nga niya, we all experience anxieties. Lahat tayo, may mga challenges sa buhay. And at that point in time, lahat tayo may mga takot sa katawan natin. May mga takot tayo sa sarili natin. Okay? Because it is brought upon by the different challenges and conflict. And because of those challenges and conflict, okay, napanghihinaan tayo ng loob. However, we try our best to remedy, okay, to find ways, to find strategies, okay, to reduce that anxiety. Okay? So when people, according to her, when people feel inferior, an idealized self-image is developed. Okay? Ano ba idealized self? So ang ideal self, sabi niya, is an imaginary picture of the self as the possessor of unlimited powers and superlative qualities. Okay? So yun daw. Kaya naman daw kasi natin eh. Kaya natin. We are built for that. Kaya sinasabi niya, the possessor of unlimited powers and superlative qualities. Kasi kung gugustuhin talaga natin, kakayanin talaga natin. Okay? Yung actual self naman, para sa kanya, is the person in actual reality. And this is the self that often fails to fulfill the requirement of the ideal self. Why? Actual self. Ano ka ngayon? Ano yung paniniwala mo sa sarili mo ngayon? Di ba lagi tayong may doubt? Sinasabi na, hindi ko kaya yan. Hindi ko kaya yan. Hindi ko nga alam kung makakatapos ako ng college. Hindi ko nga alam kung magiging maganda ang future ko. Hindi ko alam kung makakahanap kagad ako ng trabaho. Hindi ko rin alam kung magpe-perform ako ng maganda sa trabaho ko, kung magpo-promote. Hindi ko alam eh. Hindi ko talaga alam. Hindi ko alam kung kakayanin ko nga eh. So, lagi kang merong doubt sa sarili mo. Okay? Lagi kang meron doubt. Kaya nga sinasabi that ideal self, okay, is it's possesses an unlimited power and superlative qualities. Okay? It's a fictitious representation of oneself. Hindi natin nakikita yun, but nandun yun sa inside natin. Okay? Yung real self naman, para kay Karen, is that which who finds ways and try various techniques to cope with anxiety. Kasi it is not an entity, but a force that impels growth and realization. So yung real self natin, okay, siya yung nagmo-motivate na sa atin. Sinasabi niya, no, kaya mo yan, sige push lang, sige lang. If it doesn't hurt, if it doesn't kill you, then it will make you stronger, sabi ni real self. Okay, maniwala ka lang sa sarili mo. And then the idealized self, sabi niya, idealized self, ito yung, sabi nga niya, kaya ko, kakayanin ko to. Kaya ko to. Kung kaya ng iba, kaya ko din to. Di ba? Kasi sinasabi niya ganun. Kasi di ba yung ideal self sa pananaw ni Carl Rogers, di ba sabi niya, it revolves on the goals and an ambition. Right? It revolves on our goals and ambition. Right? So real self naman, this is not a person, or it's an entity which finds ways to help us in all our anxieties, in all our challenges, in all our frustrations. Okay? Because it promotes it impels growth and self-realization. Okay? Now we move on to the perspective of Kenneth Jurgens regarding multiple self and the unified self. Okay, so postmodern psychology contends that man has identity that shift and morph in different social situations and in response to different stimuli. According to Kenneth, Having a flexible sense of self is different context, is more socially adaptable than forced self to stick to oneself concept. Theorists believe that there is no definite answer to the question, who am I? Because a person can undergo several transitions in his life, thus create multiple versions of himself. However, mental well-being is important. Thus, we need to maintain a unified, centralized, and coherent self. Okay, so multiple self, these are the capacities we carry within us from multiple relationships. So it is not discovered but created in our relationship with other people. Yung unified self naman is an image of a healthy, well-balanced, and whole self, even if it has undergone various challenging experiences. So it has found an effective coping mechanism in order to continue living with this environment and profile himself to acquire knowledge through experiences in order to grow and develop as a person. Okay. Kasi nga, di ba, pag multiple self, it is not created. It is discovered. Okay? Kasi, ah, kung ano yung sitwasyon mo, okay, ngayon, you form relationship with the people around within that situation or within that environment. When you change place, when you change environment, when you change culture, of course you're going to meet people. And again, you will form another relationship. And it's a different relationship compared dun sa isa. Because wala namang parehas na sitwasyon eh. Diba? Lahat ng sitwasyon are different. So you respond differently. Your response are unique kasi different siya from other situation. Yung response mo different, depende sa kung ano yung sitwasyon na nandun ka. And because it's different, you create relationship. Okay? However, sabi nga nila, it is a must for you to unify all of those inside you. Alam mo kung sino ka pa rin. Kilala mo pa rin yung sarili mo. Despite of the fact na iba yung personality mo dito, iba yung personality mo doon, ibang behavior mo dito, ibang behavior mo doon. But at the end of the day, kilala mo pa rin yung sarili mo. Okay? So next, we have discussed previously about individualism and collectivism. Okay? So sinasabi nga natin, kapag ka-individualistic, most of those behaviors, most of those personalities can be seen sa Western culture. Okay? So para sa kanila, it's a philosophy of life emphasizing or prioritizing owns need over the group. So, ikaw muna bago yung iba. Kay individualism. Yung collectivism naman, it emphasizes the welfare of the group, which means sila muna bago ikaw. Okay, so, and those are Easterners. Okay, Asians, yan, collectivist yan. Pagka individualism sa Western, sa Europeans, yan, mga individualism yan. Kasi mas priority nila ay ang self-development rather than others. Sa atin, we prioritize relationship. That's why we prioritize others bago sarili natin. Okay? Kasi importante sa atin yung relationships within our environment. Okay? So now, we move on to the perspective naman ni Donald Winnicott. So, the concept we form about ourselves may be true or false. And these concepts may include thoughts, feelings, and beliefs that we embrace about us. So pag sinabi nating healthy false self, it is functional and can be compliant, but without the feeling that it has betrayed its true self. Okay? Kaya false self. Okay? Because false self is employed to adhere to outside regulation. It is used to comply to external rules. And normally, ito yung ating defensive facade, which is a mere appearance of being real. and it constantly seeks to anticipate the demands of others in order to maintain relationship. Kaya niya sinasabing false self. So you behave accordingly depende sa situation, depende sa people na involved on what is the level of relationship you have with them. And since we are a collectivist, since we are Asians, we prioritize saving of protecting the relationship. Kaya may false self. However, it does not mean that you lose sight of who you are. Okay? Yung true self nga, sabi nga niya, has a strong sense of morality. It has a sense of integrity. It is the sense of the self based on instinctive and authentic experiences and the feeling of being alive. So which means, at the end of the day, kilala mo kung sino ka, alam mo kung anong gusto mo at ang ayaw mo, alam mo kung anong strength at weaknesses mo. Okay? So, next, we proceed to the self as proactive and agentic. Okay? So, according to social cognitive theory ni Albert Bandura na nabanggit natin kanina, sabi niya, human has the capacity to exercise control over his own lives because people are self-regulating, proactive, self-reflective, and self-organized. That we have the power to influence our own action to produce the desired consequences. Diba? Kaya nga sinasabi, self as a cognitive approach because iniisip natin and accordingly kung ano iniisip natin, yun ang iperform ng katawan natin na magmamanifest sa behavior natin. Okay? Because we continuously act on our environment in a manner that permits growth toward psychological health. Okay? Yung agent self is known as the executive functions that allows for action. It is how an individual makes choices and utilize control in situation, and it resides over everything that involves decision making, self-control, taking charge in a situation, and actively responding. So for example, ng agent self, a person may desire to eat unhealthy food. Okay? However, it is the agent self that allows the person to choose to avoid eating unhealthy food and make healthier food choices. Okay? Yung human agency, yung tinatawag na human agency, is not a thing, but an active process of exploring, manipulating, and influencing the environment in order to attain the desired goals. So, sinasabi din ni Albert na meron daw tayong four core features ng human agency. The first is intentionality, second forethought, self-reactiveness, and self-reflectiveness. Yung intentionality daw, it asks a person to perform intentionally, which includes forming an action plan and strategies to attain the goal. So, ibig sabihin lang yan, sa lahat ng ginagawa natin, may intention kasi tayo to succeed. Diba? May goal tayo. Kaya tayo uma-action. Kaya tayo gumagalaw. Diba? Because behind everything, we have our own intention. Okay. Yung forethought naman. Yung forethought includes future directive plans, settling goals, anticipation of outcomes of action, selection of behavior to produce the desired outcome, and avoiding undesirable one. So, ibig sabihin lang yan, pinag-iisipan nating mabuti yung action natin, yung behavior natin. Kasi may intention tayo to achieve the goal. May intention tayo to be successful. Kaya, para ma-attain natin yun, pinag-iisipan, pinagpaplanuhan natin. Kaya forethought. Okay? Yung self-reactiveness naman, it keeps track of how it keeps track of or monitor progress towards fulfilling our choices. And it includes self-management and self-motivation. Okay? So, tinitignan natin, Ano na ba yung yung progress ng ginagawa ko? Am I still on track? Naka-schedule pa rin ba ako o na-off track ako? Okay? So, kung na-off track ako, ano yung mga bagay na nakaka-off track sa akin? Okay? Ah, tama ba yung ginagawa ko? Mali ba yung ginagawa ko? Okay, so yung self-reflectiveness naman examines one's own functioning and assessing the impact of others' action on the individual are relevant. Okay, so sabi nga, reflectiveness, you reflect, di ba? Tinitignan mo yung sarili mo, yun na nga, kung tama pa ba yung ginagawa mo, kung nakakasakit ka ba, nakakaperwisyo ka ba, nakakatulong ka ba. Okay, so ganon. We have intentions at pinag-iisipan natin kung paano natin ma-achieve ang mga goals natin. We monitor ourselves if we're still on track, and then we reflect. We reflect, we examine kung anong impact ng iba at ang impact natin sa iba. Okay? Si Albert Bandura, meron din siyang tinatawag na self-efficacy. Okay? Yung self-efficacy is the belief that the person is capable of performing actions that will produce the desired effect. So, iyon yung paniniwala mo, iyon yung conviction mo, na kaya mo, na kakayanin mo. Okay? Para na matagumpayan yung isang sitwasyon o kaya mo ma-achieve yung goal mo. So, yun yung paniniwala mo sa sarili mo. Okay? It is your belief. Sabi nga, people with high efficacy are often eager to accept challenges because they believe that they can overcome it. Yung mga low self-efficacy naman, they avoid challenges kasi naniniwala sila that experiences are more challenging than they actually are. So, wala silang kumpiyansa sa sarili nila. Hindi sila naniniwala na kaya talaga nila. Okay? So, that's pretty much is a discussion revolving the psychological view of the self. So, sabi nga, regardless kung ano pa yung behavior natin o action natin in a different situation, in a different environment, in different culture, kung challenges man yan, kung ano ba man yan, deep inside, we still know who we are. We should not lose track of who we are. And if if in every action, in every behavior, we have to believe in ourselves. We have to believe that we can overcome challenges. We have to believe that we can reach our goal. We have to believe in ourselves. Okay? Once again, so these are the references, some of the references which I use. And again, I would like to thank you for being with me in this lecture, for listening, for watching this video. So please do not